What if the Bible left out some of the most extraordinary stories about our Jesus' childhood, miracles that were too surprising or controversial to include? Imagine discovering a forgotten manuscript filled with tales about a young Jesus wielding divine powers in ways you've never heard before. Welcome to Armchair Archaeology. Today we'll reveal the oldest known manuscript of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, an ancient text brimming with stories of Jesus' early life that didn't make it into the Bible. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll learn about one incredible childhood miracle that will forever change the way you see Jesus. In a stunning discovery, scholars Gabriel Nocky-Macedo and Lajos Berkes uncovered fragments of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, written in Greek and dating back to the 5th or 6th century CE. These fragments represent the oldest known version of the text, which itself dates to around the 2nd century CE. The manuscript was found in a collection of neglected documents, offering a rare window into early Christian literature that had long been forgotten. The significance of this find lies in its age and content. Not only does it predate other known copies, but it also preserves stories about Jesus' childhood that circulated in early Christian communities. These are tales of a young Jesus discovering his divine powers and learning how to wield them. Stories that didn't make it into the Bible. For scholars, this discovery is crucial for understanding the diversity of early Christian beliefs about Jesus. Finding a manuscript like this after so many centuries is a rare event. Early Christian texts, particularly apocryphal ones, were often destroyed or lost as the church solidified its doctrine and decided which stories would become part of the official biblical canon. This manuscript, however, managed to survive, giving us a direct link to the ways early Christians may have understood Jesus in a more human, developmental context, one in which he wasn't born fully aware of his divine mission. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas is a non-canonical text written in the 2nd century CE, detailing Jesus' childhood between the ages of 5 and 12. Unlike the canonical Gospels, which jump from Jesus' birth to his adulthood, this text focuses on his early years, when he is portrayed as a child learning to control his miraculous powers. These stories range from heartwarming to unsettling, offering a side of Jesus that is rarely explored in traditional Christian teachings. In one famous story, Jesus molds 12 clay birds and brings them to life with a simple word, an act of creation that reflects his divine abilities but also draws the ire of those around him for working on the Sabbath. Another tale recounts how Jesus, in a moment of frustration, strikes down a boy who bumps into him, only to later resurrect him after being scolded by others. These stories show a young Jesus discovering the consequences of his power, hinting at his need to learn responsibility and compassion. For early Christian communities, these stories may have served as a way to humanize Jesus, depicting him as a divine figure who still needed to grow just as any other child would. However, the unpredictability of his miracles and the occasional depiction of anger or frustration likely contributed to the Gospel's exclusion from the Bible. Today, this text provides a fascinating insight into early Christians' attempts to reconcile Jesus' human development with his divine nature. So, why didn't the Infancy Gospel of Thomas make it into the Bible? In the early centuries of Christianity, the Church had not yet settled on which texts would be part of the official New Testament. Many different Gospels and writings circulated among Christian communities, each offering unique interpretations of Jesus' life. The process of determining which texts were divinely inspired, what we now call the biblical canon, was long and complex. Texts that didn't fit the evolving doctrines were gradually excluded. One of the main reasons the Infancy Gospel of Thomas was left out likely has to do with its portrayal of a young Jesus who isn't always in control. The canonical Gospels present a consistent image of Jesus as a figure of calm, wisdom, and moral authority. In contrast, this apocryphal gospel shows a child Jesus who sometimes acts out of frustration or anger, performing miracles that are as destructive as they are miraculous. This depiction would have been difficult for church leaders to reconcile with the emerging image of a perfect, sinless Jesus. Moreover, the gospel raises theological questions about Jesus' nature. By showing him as a child who grows and learns, it presents a more human, developmental side of Jesus, one that conflicts with the later church's emphasis on his divinity. The early church was eager to emphasize Jesus' divine perfection, even from childhood, and the stories in the Infancy Gospel didn't align with that vision. As the church sought to establish a unified doctrine, stories like these were left on the cutting room floor, labeled as apocryphal and eventually forgotten. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas is more than just a collection of stories. It offers a unique glimpse into the diversity of early Christian beliefs. In the first few centuries of Christianity, there was no unified doctrine. Different communities interpreted Jesus' life in various ways, and many of these interpretations found their way into texts that circulated widely before the Bible as we know it was formed. The diversity in these writings reflects the theological debates of the time, particularly around the nature of Jesus. Was he fully divine, fully human, or a complex mixture of both? In this gospel, Jesus is depicted as a divine child who is still learning to control his power. This portrayal likely resonated with early Christians who saw him as both a divine figure and someone who experienced human growth. These stories might have made Jesus more relatable, portraying him as someone who, like any child, had to learn the consequences of his actions. For some, this humanization of Jesus may have been comforting. It showed that even someone as divine as Jesus had to grow and develop. However, other Christian communities found this portrayal controversial. The idea of a learning, sometimes unpredictable Jesus conflicted with the image of the sinless, all-knowing Christ that was taking shape in official doctrine. The existence of this gospel highlights how fluid early Christian beliefs were, as different groups explored the balance between Jesus' humanity and divinity. Understanding these stories helps modern scholars appreciate the richness of early Christian literature and the variety of perspectives that contributed to the development of Christian theology. This Greek manuscript of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, dating back to the 5th or 6th century CE, is the oldest known copy of the text. Its survival through centuries of religious and political changes is nothing short of remarkable, especially given that many apocryphal gospels were suppressed or lost over time. Early Christian manuscripts, especially those outside the official canon, often faced destruction as the church solidified its teachings. Yet, this text survived, offering scholars a rare glimpse into the world of early Christian literature. The manuscript's preservation also raises fascinating questions about how these stories continued to circulate, even after being labeled non-canonical. Despite its exclusion from the New Testament, the Infancy Gospel of Thomas clearly remained important to certain Christian communities who continued to copy and preserve it. This suggests that while the official church may have rejected these stories, they still held value for groups who found meaning in Jesus' childhood miracles and his developmental journey. Scribes and scholars likely played a key role in ensuring the survival of this manuscript, carefully preserving it through generations. Whether stored in monasteries, private libraries, or hidden away from the eyes of church authorities, this manuscript's existence today highlights the dedication of those early Christians who valued these stories. The text's age and preservation allow modern historians to explore how apocryphal gospels influenced early Christian thought and the broader development of religious narratives. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas is part of a larger body of apocryphal gospels, texts that were not included in the Bible but were widely read in the early centuries of Christianity. Apocryphal Gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Peter, offered alternative narratives about Jesus, often focusing on aspects of his life or teachings that the canonical Gospels left out. These texts reflect the theological diversity of early Christianity and provide a fuller picture of how different communities understood Jesus. For many early Christians, apocryphal texts held spiritual value and offered insights into Jesus' life that resonated with their beliefs. The stories in these Gospels often presented a more human Jesus, one who was more relatable and who experienced growth and development. This was especially true of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which depicted a child Jesus learning to control his divine powers. While the Church eventually decided to exclude these Gospels from the Bible, they remained influential in shaping the religious landscape of the time. The decision to exclude apocryphal texts from the canon wasn't solely about historical accuracy or spiritual insight. It was also influenced by the Church's desire to establish a unified doctrine. As Christianity grew and became more structured, Church leaders sought to create a set of texts that would represent the core teachings of the faith. This process inevitably involved excluding stories and Gospels that didn't fit with the developing theology. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas, with its portrayal of a sometimes unruly young Jesus, didn't align with the Church's image of a perfect Christ, and so it was left out. However, its survival reminds us of the rich diversity of early Christian literature. For scholars, the discovery of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas manuscript is a treasure trove of information about early Christian literature. It provides direct evidence of how early Christians explored the idea of Jesus as both divine and human, particularly during his childhood. This manuscript allows historians to trace how stories about Jesus circulated in different communities and how these stories evolved over time. Even after being excluded from the Bible, the Greek manuscript's age and content offer clues about the transmission of Christian texts during the first few centuries. Its survival suggests that certain Christian communities continued to value these apocryphal stories, copying them by hand over generations. For modern scholars, this raises important questions about how early Christians viewed the texts that didn't make it into the Bible. Did they see them as less authoritative, or simply as alternative interpretations of Jesus' life? The manuscript helps answer these questions by showing how diverse Christian thought was during its formative centuries. This discovery also has major implications for understanding how the New Testament was formed. By studying apocryphal texts like the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, scholars can better understand why certain stories were included or excluded from the official canon. This process wasn't just about preserving correct theology, but also about shaping an image of Jesus that fit with the Church's evolving beliefs. The discovery of this manuscript opens up new avenues of research, allowing historians to delve deeper into the early Christian world and the competing visions of Jesus that existed at the time. One of the most fascinating elements of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is the portrayal of young Jesus performing miracles. These miracles differ greatly from those in the canonical Gospels, as they show a Jesus who is still learning to control his powers. In one well-known story, Jesus creates 12 clay birds and brings them to life with a word, much to the amazement and concern of those around him. This act of creation foreshadows the miracles of his adult ministry, but with a more playful, childlike twist. Other stories are more unsettling, highlighting the potential danger of unchecked power. In one account, Jesus strikes a boy dead after being bumped into, only to resurrect him later when confronted by those who witnessed the event. In another, he curses a child who mocks him, causing the child to wither away. These stories present a side of Jesus that is rarely seen in traditional Christian teachings, a young, divine figure who is still coming to terms with the responsibilities of his extraordinary abilities. What makes these miracles so intriguing is the tension between creation and destruction, between a divine power that heals and one that can harm. For early Christian communities, these stories may have emphasized the importance of growth and learning, even for someone as powerful as Jesus. They offer a more humanized depiction of Jesus, showing that he, too, had to learn how to use his power wisely. These tales add depth to the character of Jesus, portraying him as both divine and human, struggling with the same lessons of power and responsibility that many humans face. One of the key themes in the Infancy Gospel of Thomas is the humanization of Jesus. Unlike the adult Jesus of the canonical Gospels, who is often portrayed as calm, wise, and in full control of his powers, the young Jesus in this Gospel is depicted as a child who is still growing and learning. This portrayal makes Jesus more relatable, showing that even he went through a process of development. In these stories, Jesus is not born fully aware of his divine mission. Instead, he experiences the world much like any child would, reacting to situations with a mix of innocence and impulsiveness. For example, when he heals or resurrects someone, there's a sense of discovery, as though he's testing the limits of what he can do. This human side of Jesus, learning to navigate the weight of his powers, adds depth to his character and offers a fresh perspective for modern readers. Early Christian communities may have found this portrayal of Jesus comforting. It showed that, despite his divine origins, he still faced the challenges of growing up and learning how to use his gifts responsibly. For many, this humanized version of Jesus made him more accessible and relatable, offering a figure who understood the struggles of ordinary life. At the same time, the unpredictable nature of his powers added a sense of mystery and complexity to his character, reflecting the theological debates of the time about how to balance his humanity and divinity. Today, these stories challenge traditional views of Jesus as a flawless, all-knowing figure from birth. Instead, they present a Jesus who matures, learns, and grows just like any human child. This humanization doesn't diminish his divinity, rather, it enhances the understanding of his dual nature, making him a more dynamic and multi-dimensional figure. As we promised, here's the fun fact you've been waiting for. One of the most extraordinary miracles from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, the time young Jesus resurrected a playmate who had fallen from a rooftop. This story is one of the clearest examples of young Jesus' power to give life, even at an age when he's still learning how to use it. After his friend fell, young Jesus immediately came to the scene, calmly performing what would become one of his most famous acts: resurrection. What makes this miracle so significant is how it foreshadows the resurrection miracles of Jesus' adult life, such as the raising of Lazarus. In this childhood tale, Jesus demonstrates that even in his youth, he wielded the power to restore life. Yet unlike the more polished, deliberate miracles of his adulthood, this story reflects a youthful spontaneity, as though Jesus was still experimenting with his powers and discovering his own capabilities. For early Christians, this story may have emphasized Jesus' divine nature, showing that even as a child, he had control over life and death. Yet it also highlights his developing sense of compassion and responsibility. The resurrection of his friend is a pivotal moment, hinting at the mature, compassionate healer he would later become. Though left out of the canonical Gospels, this story enriches the narrative of Jesus' life by offering a glimpse into his early miracles, long before the ones described in the New Testament. Thank you for embarking on this captivating journey into the discovery of the Infancy Gospel of Thomas and the forgotten stories of Jesus' childhood. If you enjoyed exploring this hidden chapter of early Christian history, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Armchair Archaeology for more deep dives into ancient manuscripts and lost civilizations. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll never miss out on our next adventure. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of these lesser-known stories of Jesus? Are there other ancient texts or civilizations you want us to explore next? Let us know below. Until our next discovery, keep exploring, keep questioning, and always stay curious.